Welcome everyone. Today I am talking to Chris Dixon of chrisdixon.dev. And Chris, why don't you introduce yourself to everyone on the internet? We talked off camera about how Chris hates selling himself. So hopefully this will be the only salesy thing I get you to do today, Chris. But tell the people why they should check you out and your stuff.
Yeah, we can give it one little push at the start, and that's it. Yeah. I'm a web developer and I create courses. So I've just recently created a Vue.js course, which has been kind of my life for the last 5 or 6 months. That was just released the back end of last week. So really happy to get that one out there, and it frees up my time to chat with good people like Niall and do some extra things too.
Nice. Excellent. And you've been using Vue for quite a long time now, haven't you?
Yeah. I think Vue version 1, I kind of jumped onto it really when it was just before it kind of transitioned to Vue 2, which was maybe, I'm not sure actually, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, something like that. So it's not kind of like React, which has lots of smaller updates. Really, I think React on what 17 is it?
Yeah, 17 point something now.
Yeah. So it's just the third. Vue's on its third release now. So I think I seen an interview with the creator a little while ago, and he was kind of saying that he does expect this third version to be kind of around for even longer than Vue 2 because it's more modular. You know, it's kind of extendable in a way. So it's a completely different kind of architecture to Vue 2. So I think they're kind of hoping it'll last longer than Vue 2 as well. So hopefully we shouldn't have any huge frameworks to learn again.
Yeah, and that's an interesting. I think we'll touch on those changes very shortly as well, because that's why I suppose I wanted to get you on. I'm a React developer. That's my day job. I work with React Native and React all the time.
Oh, I'm going.
Yeah, exactly. And the Vue-ers, and you've often seen my chats and everything else where people are bullying me for not doing Vue and things. But I also don't want to teach people things I'm not comfortable with and say this is how you do it. So that's why I want to get experts like yourself on to explain these things in a way I just never could, or at least it would take me months and months of time to figure out how to explain this in a way that you can probably very easily because you've been doing it for years.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, even I've just had this learning curve myself over the last 6 months. Because I mean, Vue came out, Vue version 3 was at the end of October maybe. So it's kind of only been active for a few months, but because I knew I was updating the Vue 2 course to Vue 3 and I'll be using it, it's kind of been in preview mode for quite some time, really. So we could, the command tool that you use to build Vue applications, it's had the Vue 3 preview option for quite some time, really. So although it has been pretty stable, there hasn't been a lot changed in maybe the last year. It's kind of been good to get a bit of a play around with it and just kind of test out the new features and just really get ahead. I mean, because I teach people as my job, I definitely need to get one step ahead of a lot of people, especially before it actually comes out. By no means, I'm not an expert on Vue 3, I would say. I mean, some people may think I am, but from my opinion, we're all still learning it. It's something completely new to all of us, and we're all still definitely trying to get the hang of it. But we've had some time now to get used to it, so it feels a lot more comfortable now.
Yeah, and look, as I said, I think you're being modest really as well, because I'm sure like anyone that watches your videos knows how good you are at this stuff as well. But as I said, with new technology, there's always going to be more to learn, and there's always crafty people who figure out different ways to use these things that we didn't even intend on using. That I suppose Evan, you wouldn't have even intended on using this for. And that's the great thing about the crazy scientists in the world that are just hacking away with this stuff and saying, hey, did you know you can do this thing? And then it's like, oh, well, now that's a standard.
Yeah. I think the good thing is as well, I mean, I've not just been with learning Vue 3, it's kind of up my JavaScript game as well, because Vue 3, the newer syntax it's all just JavaScript, so it kind of reinforces everything you already know. If we're building a project and we get stuck, a lot of the times the solution isn't something which is in the Vue documentation. It's maybe something which you apply in Vue.js, but it's just JavaScript. So it's not necessarily you're just learning a new framework. I mean, kind of like React. When you work with React, you're not just working with React. It's JavaScript. So yeah, I mean, we've all gone through the changes with React from classes into functional components and things like that. And this is all JavaScript syntax as well. So it's really good to get a wide range, a broad range of different frameworks. Well, I think learning both React and Vue is really good because they have a lot of similarities, and they just both really make you up your JavaScript game as well.
Yeah, and you know, it's funny you say that because I'm one of the few people, and I don't like to say it because I know this is a very controversial statement I'm about to go out with. But before I was doing JavaScript properly, I was doing PHP, and I was, you know, HTML, CSS, PHP, WordPress stuff. Great. And then I seen that React jobs were paying more, so I just went and learned React. I never really bothered learning JavaScript properly first. And it was actually probably about a year of debugging React applications till I realized, oh wait, this is just JavaScript. I actually know a lot of JavaScript now, which I thought was React, because I had just jumped straight in head first and said, right, do this thing. So I was, you know, working with APIs and grabbing stuff and modifying values, splitting and everything else. And I didn't have a clue that was part of JavaScript. I just assumed from Stack Overflow that it was all in React.
Yeah.
So I always laugh and say it's kind of like accidental mastery in a way, because the more you use the tools, the more you realize they're not doing anything but exposing the best parts of JavaScript, really.
Definitely. I think that kind of goes back to beginner basics as well, because some people try to teach the library with the state management libraries all built in and the router and all these things. So you don't kind of know which part is Vue, which part is React when you're kind of learning everything all at once. I mean, that's kind of like why in our last stream, we just kind of imported a CDN link and just worked purely with Vue.js and nothing else to get distracted with, because I'm kind of, I know it's controversial, but just like you said there, I'm with you on that one. I think sometimes if you know some basics, you can just jump in and you can sort of learn a lot more as you go.
Yeah. Well, like I said, it's different for everyone. Like, it depends on how much time you have as well to learn these things. Like, if you have the luxury of being able to, you know, fully understand a language before you have to work with it, great. That wasn't a luxury I could afford. I had to start working and I had to just learn how to use this tool fast. So, and I'm sure for yourself, even with the content creation and the course creation, again, it's just like you need to learn how to use this tool. You know, and you'll only figure that out by playing with it.
Yeah. I mean, I only learned JavaScript proxies because of Vue 3. I don't know if you've had a use of proxies yourself, but I mean, I've never had a use. I mean, they're not one of the newer features of JavaScript, but I've never had a use case to learn proxies and understand them before Vue 3 came out. So I'm not an expert on
reactivity
proxies.
engine, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I'm not a proxies expert. It's something which happens under the hood, but I wanted to make sure that I had an understanding of it, of what exactly is going on and why it was changed, just to sort of fully understand reactivity and why it's all working, really. But and why they actually changed it from Vue 2 to Vue 3, and I think a lot of it's just because of the browser support, really. And JavaScript's moved on. When Vue 2 was created, I don't think proxies were even around. So was it ES6 proxies came in. So when Vue 2 was created, a lot of these kind of features weren't available to take advantage of. So it's kind of one of the good things about having 5 years between one version and the next one. You can really take advantage of a lot of the JavaScript improvements and browser support and things like that.
I think that's a nice segue really into like what is different between Vue 2 and Vue 3. As you said, like 5 years is a long time.
Yeah.
So, you know, but it's still the same framework under the hood, I guess, in a sense. It's like still solving the same problems. It's just how they solve them have changed, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I like to sort of think of these things as all that people people make them far too complicated with tutorials and explanations, but basically they just take data in and put it on the screen. We just need to handle how we render this data and how we want to display it and organize it. So if you kind of just think of it as handling data, from an API or a back end, it kind of does become a little bit simpler. We just take the data in and kind of, I know it's not thrown it into the browser, but all the rest of the complexities in the middle, we create ourselves as developers, really. But yeah, back to the changes and the updates. Basically, Vue 3 is a complete rewrite from Vue 2. It's not been just developed or updated. It's a complete rewrite from scratch. Many reasons. Like we mentioned before, we can now use proxies, which solve some of the reactivity problems. Vue 2 used an ES5 feature called object.define property to handle reactivity, and there was one or two issues which that created, which proxies have solved. Mainly, if you add a reactive property to Vue.js after it's created, previously in Vue 2 it wouldn't track it and keep it up to date, but proxy solves that. And so it's a complete rewrite from Vue 2. It's now wrote in TypeScript, so it doesn't mean you have to use TypeScript as a developer, but under the hood it's all wrote in TypeScript. But it does enable better TypeScript support for the developer. TypeScript was okay to use in Vue 2, but now it's fully integrated. Now it's not it's a first class citizen, as they say. But it's just kind of, as well as the sort of rewrite, it's given them a chance to look at things like the virtual DOM and how it could be improved. There's a great talk from Evan Yu about why he switched to proxies, and he went kind of deep into reactivity and how the old virtual DOM hit certain problems. And it was all based on when the virtual DOM was checking updates, it had to check the full component. But now Vue 3 batches each component into certain parts, namely the parts which are dynamic or can change is now grouped into its own sort of separate section. So rather than if a component had 1,000 lines, it's now aware that maybe only 20 of them can change. So rather than checking the difference between the old and new one, it now has this small section just to check. So that, as you can imagine, that makes it so much more faster and much more efficient. And I think that's one of the good things about Vue 3. It's kind of these are some new features from the developer's point of view, which we'll get to. But generally, if you've used Vue 2 in the past, you can just completely change the Vue 3 without doing anything. There's one or two minor sort of things you need to change, but it's as an upgrade path from Vue 2 to Vue 3, it's so straightforward. I mean, if you had a Vue 2 project now, and then you change the Vue core to Vue 3, I would be pretty confident that 98% didn't need a lot of changes. So that's really good from a developer's point of view as well. I haven't gone all Angular 2 and sort of made it all completely different.
I suppose that's a good point, because that's a real pain. I think, especially for companies that are using these frameworks and tools, that they're worried about how long they're going to have a shiny new app for and how long they're going to have to maintain it, because every developer wants to be working with new tools to up their game. And the harder it is that upgrade path is, if that's difficult, it's harder for a company to say, yeah, well, let's upgrade it so people can stay happy. So
yeah, definitely.
It's definitely a great thing to have out of, four things. Because I said that's one of my main reasons I stick with React, because it's always, each update is, it doesn't throw away anything from the last. You can still, if you're keeping up with it, it's very easy to update all the time. Whereas some other, I don't like dissing any frameworks or anything else, but like different approaches are hard. And then you need to write something like Angular has their upgrade tools now, but it's a CLI tool that you have to run to upgrade everything, which is a little bit scarier, I think, than just saying, "Oh, it works."
Yeah, I think definitely React and Vue's learned from that thing that happened with Angular in the early days. So I think the whole web development world's kind of learned from that. Really, I mean, they lost so much market share. I don't think teams that run these companies that look after these tools can now afford to do such a big change and lose such a chunk of the users in one go. So yeah, I think definitely the upgrade path's pretty smooth anyway. I've did it myself. I've upgraded a Vue 2 app to Vue 3 recently, and it was pretty straightforward. So it's pretty smooth. I mean, as well as the new features which kind of Vue has, it doesn't encourage them to be used immediately either. I mean, if you had a small Vue 2 app, you can upgrade it and immediately get better, faster performance. But generally, the extra, I mean, we'll talk about the composition API soon, which is probably the big thing that everybody's excited about, but that's purely additive. I mean, you could start a new Vue 3 app and completely write it in composition, or you can sort of bring it in incrementally. It's kept separate on the code. There's the existing section, and then alongside it, you can put the composition section, and you can just move over one piece at a time. Composition is just more like JavaScript. So it's if you have reactive data in Vue, you maybe just remove one line of code and then create a constant in the composition section, and then just do that for each time. And it's kind of a straight replacement, and you can just do it gradually and bring parts in. So it's really easy, especially if you've got some Vue 2 knowledge. You can still write Vue 3 apps with Vue 2. It's encouraged if you have a small to medium sized app to not go composition, and then just kind of keep rolling with it, just keep going. And once the app gets bigger, you can maybe introduce the composition, and then the new features. But yeah, generally, I think the upgrade path is so smooth. I mean, they've kind of got everyone covered, from a beginner JavaScript developer that can use the existing Vue code, or more advanced developers or ones coming from React, they can use the composition, and it's just like writing JavaScript. But yeah, so I think they've kind of got all angles covered, really. I think they've been pretty clever with this update. They've kind of got the beginners right through to the advanced developers. So, I think that kind of shows in the code base. They've kept in the old stuff and have the new stuff as well.
Yeah, that's important, I think, as well, to point out. Like, as it does, that upgrade path, that ease of learning, and especially even for finding answers to the bugs you find along the way, at least like old Stack Overflow answers might still help you.
Yeah.
When they're easy to translate, you can find an old answer to a problem, and you're like, definitely. Oh, I actually know how to tweak this to work with the newer API as such.
Yeah, definitely. I've even found React answers on Stack Overflow, which applies to Vue, and the other way around, because if you have a little knowledge of both, they just kind of translate in a way. And like we said before, they're just JavaScript a lot of the time. So the solution isn't always related to the framework. It's it's sometimes just JavaScript.
Yeah, I think after with experience we start to realize that, because I remember in the early days I would always be Googling how to do such a thing with React, when really I should have been just like, how do I do such a thing? Yeah. And then once you figure out how to do it in JavaScript, you just do it with the help of one of these frameworks or libraries.
Yeah, definitely.
Excellent. So the composition API, you touched off this. Why is everyone excited? For me, because, and I want to understand this, because for me, like I said, no secret if anyone's used to my channel that I don't write Vue. So I want to know why I should be excited about it, or why I should jump into it and play around with it.
Yeah, I think people are excited now, but when it was first released, or first announced, it got a lot of backlash. And I think it was just because, kind of like we mentioned before, with the Angular days and for Angular 2, Vue developers were used to writing Vue code, the Vue 2 library being out for a number of years. And then it kind of looked like on the initial announcement that everything we have learned is just getting thrown out the window. The announcement never said that, and I never took it as that, but a lot of people kind of heard what they wanted to hear in a way and just thought, oh no, Vue's getting completely rewrote. I think with having composition and also mentioning that the whole Vue core was being rewritten, a lot of people sort of started panicking, and it did get a lot of backlash. But yeah, I think once people understand more now that it's purely additive, there's nothing which is breaking anything from Vue 2. You can just kind of introduce it later on, move things over. Yeah, I think it's gone down really well, and the whole kind of idea with composition is kind of it's kind of a way of, once your application gets really big, if you've seen a Vue 2 app in the past, it can have a data section with all the variables. It can have a method section, and these can run hundreds of lines of code, even thousands into a component. So it kind of does get a little bit messy. It looks really beginner friendly when you have a simple example. You have, a counter variable, then you have a method which increments it. It looks so simple and beginner friendly, but in real terms, once your components get to hundreds of lines of code, you're scrolling up and down all the time to get to related parts. So with composition, it just it takes a little bit of Vue out of it and just brings it back to JavaScript. So you can pull out your data, your variables, your methods, the watches and things, and just group them together. You can even split them up into separate files, so you can have a file which maybe imports some data from the database. You can then have a second file which is used to update some data, and they're just all little snippets. Each file can be broken down into little snippets that you can import into different files. So it's just like I say, it's just JavaScript. It's nothing crazy, but yeah. So the things that it does solve is big components being unorganized. You can kind of pull out all the sections you need and just group them together. And the second thing is it's kind of like state management in a way, because if you have some data that you need, you just put it into a JavaScript file. Say you need to get a list of users from an API. You just make an API call in a JavaScript file, and then you can import that file into any component you want. It can be at the top level, it can be 20 child components deep, but it's just one single import, and then that data is available anywhere. So there's no props, there's no sending functions back up the chain. It's I think people are still sort of saying you do need the state management for really big applications. Vue's got its own state management library called Vue-ers, but to be honest, I can't see it being necessary until you get really big. These state management libraries are obviously really good at handling mass updates and lots of different information coming in and out. But I think for smaller to medium-sized apps, it kind of ticks the box of state management as well. So yeah, there's a lot. It's pretty simple, but on the other hand, it solves a lot of problems as well.
Yeah, and I think the less extra tools you need to bring in to build those apps and manage state and everything else is, again, for beginners, makes life a lot easier, because you don't have to learn how to manage state separately while you're learning this. You know how to, so you can get an actual app up and running rather, I won't say easily, but you can, once you understand it, you know how to do it.
Yeah, it's just imports and exports, just like JavaScript. Just grab some code, put it into a new file, and import it in which component you need it. It's pretty
Right.
simple, really. Yeah. You can still sort of sprinkle in the Vue-ness to it. Vue had things like watches to watch data and then run callback functions, and it had computed properties that watch data, and then it will sort of watch anything that changes and then recalculate values. And you can still add these into composition too. So if you have constants, you just add this as a wrapper. So it's kind of more wrappers now rather than different Vue code. It doesn't look much different to JavaScript. You just create your constants, your functions, and just maybe add a wrapper for a computed value. Reactivity, that's probably a big thing too. With a constant, you create, constant name equals Chris, Niall, whatever. And then all you need to do is just wrap it into a reactive wrapper. So there's two different main types of reactivity. There's a ref and also one called reactive. And these are just kind of wrappers for the data. I mean, ref is, to be honest, ref versus reactive was probably the thing which I had to think about the most in the early days when learning composition. Because I already knew JavaScript, the actual syntax was pretty straightforward, but it's all of the wrappers that you kind of need to get your head around. Generally, a ref it's a way to take a simple value like a primitive. So if you just have a string or a number, it's just a simple wrapper. You just put const name equals ref and then put the value inside that ref. And then you can update it. And then that also means that value keeps its reactivity anywhere it's sent. If it's sent to different components, if it's used in different files, that reactivity is kept. We also have a reactive wrapper, which works exactly the same, but that's kind of more for object syntax. So if you have an object with lots of properties, you would wrap it in reactive, and it's kind of just how you picture the data, really, which one you use. Reactive is more for objects when you have lots of related properties and then you just group them together. It's kind of like if you think of React and you create a state object, you can have lots of different properties. That's probably more like how reactive works. You would just set up a constant called state or users or anything related, whereas a ref is just a very simple wrapper for like a primitive, a string, anything like that, really. So I think once you get your head around those two things, these one or two quirks as well, which is probably not simple to go into because it takes a bit of explaining, really, and we need to see some code examples. But I think once you get your head around those two, composition becomes a lot more simpler.
And I think that's a good point, because I think this is and unless there's more of the changes you want to go through in Vue 3, because I think those kind of little tips are great for people that are just learning this or about to learn this, like where should they spend their time. Now, I don't want to divert in case there's something you've missed that you think has to be called out on the Vue 3 updates.
In terms of different things, I mean, it's the extra things of kind of there's a few things sprinkled here and there. Composition was probably the main one. There's a lot of things which should look at home to React developers. There's fragments, so you don't need a single div to wrap a component. Little things like that, because Vue doesn't get small updates; it just gets this big Vue 3 one. So things like this, which React have maybe had for some time, obviously couldn't be put in until a major version. There's portals, which I think you'll be also familiar with. So basically just grabbing a section of code and sending it to a different part of the application. So the classic example for portals is a modal. So I think we've probably all seen a modal pop up, and often when you have a modal, it's got lots of different wrappers. It'll be some part of a component, and that component to be inside another component, which will be inside another component. And then to get a modal to pop up on the screen involves quite a lot of CSS. So to sort of save a lot of this CSS work, we just pull it out and put it in a different part of the application which has no wrappers, and it just becomes a lot more simpler. But yeah,
it gets rid of the need for really complex global state management to do something simple like that as well, because often that's what it is. You have something that you want to cover the entire screen, which is totally separate to your app, really. So yeah, having things like portals available that you can use for loaders or blocking actions or modals, it really simplifies the creation of those things, because they are one of the trickier things, I think, in Vue or React or any of these things, because of the downward flowing data that you have to call it from way up in the top of the app. And that can be, if you haven't set your app up to do that, it can be horrendous.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, in terms of new features, I mean, I've probably missed one or two new features. There's suspense, which you'll be familiar with. But yeah, I think a lot of the composition was probably the big one. Anything else is kind of performance under the hood, better support for TypeScript, just smaller changes which aren't going to rock the world or anything sort of groundbreaking. But yeah, I think definitely composition is probably the main one coupled with TypeScript support and yeah, performance definitely. So it's not a case of learning something completely new. It's just kind of adjusting what you already know and just building upon it. A Vue 3 application can look either the same as Vue 2, or it can look completely different. And it's all down to whether you want it to be the same or you want it to grow and be more modular and reusable. So yeah, I think that's sort of the key takeaway for me with Vue 2 versus Vue 3 is it's the same. You know, you can use Vue 2 and Vue 3 applications, no problem, or you can go one step further and introduce composition and just completely write it in a different syntax. And to be honest, even though Vue 3 composition is marketed as an advanced feature, I would probably write a new Vue app purely with composition from now. I don't think I'd use the old syntax. It's probably being put in alongside the old syntax to sort of keep people happy as well. There probably is a lot of that, but yeah, I think personally it's just down to preference. If you like the old syntax or the new syntax, you have options now. So
yeah, and I think that comes down to a lot of these, especially with newer features or bigger changes to it. These companies or these developers don't want to say, "Here's the new way to do it," because people just panic and get annoyed and just say, "I'm not doing that. Why did you change things?" So it's better to just ease people in and say, "We suggest you try this out."
yeah,
we're not saying you have to, but it may work better.
Yeah, I think down the line it'll be used exclusively, personally, but we'll soon find out.
Nice. And so let's then for this should be your expertise since you teach newbies all the time Vue. So for the newcomers into Vue, so for this would suit me down to the ground really. So it's also selfishly for me, I'm asking this question: is where should people spend their time? What should they focus on doing, or what should they focus on learning to really become proficient in Vue faster than if they just kind of opened up the docs and started just going, here it is?
Yeah. Probably two different directions. I mean, first of all, if you have no JavaScript experience, you probably want to pick up the very basics, but just kind of like we did in the last workshop would probably be an ideal way for somebody who, if you know some HTML and you know some CSS, both Vue and React have a CDN link, which you can just drop into a project and just basically start taking parts of the HTML out of the file and just bringing it into a JavaScript file. And the CDN link will allow you to then make that data reactive. You can then create methods, which is going to update it. Generally, clicking on buttons and making things happen is, really exciting for new people. On the other hand, if you come from React or Angular or anything else, Svelte, you probably could just jump straight into the build tool, which is the Vue CLI. So it's just a tool which you run Vue create and then the name, and it just creates a new Vue 3 application, and it will give you the main app.vue, which is the top level wrapper, and it'll give you the first component, the hello world, and that, I think between those, that's probably enough to sort of help you understand how it works. There's a top level component, there's a component nested inside. I think the hello world example probably receives a prop down from the main file, and yeah, if you've got some JavaScript experience, you could probably jump straight into that. I don't think there'll be anything crazy, and then just build on it. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. Well, I'm a big advocate for saying, often pick something you want to build and then, try build it with this and see how it goes. Like, even if it's a to-do app or something, at least then you know what you don't know, because you're like, well, I don't know how to take something off the DOM. I don't know how to, it makes it a little bit more practical than, just doing random things.
Yeah.
Like your simple counter apps.
Yeah, I think on the back of that, I would definitely say, Vue aside, just build something you enjoy. Whether that's a subject you enjoy. I think probably the only reason I'm sitting here now doing web development is because my first project we built at school was something I enjoyed. It was about a racing car series, and the teacher just said, build a website on any subject you like. So we all picked different things: football, racing cars, computer games. And that's probably the only reason why I'm still doing it now. If back then the teacher said, build a website on, something school, you know, we wouldn't have been interested and it wouldn't have got completed. And yeah, I think just having an interest in something can take you so far. Definitely.
And I think you two take that a very practical approach with your new course as well, don't you?
Yeah, the course is practically all building a project. There's 4 projects in the course which has been released, but every single example practically goes into the final project. There's 1 or 2 times we step out of the project and we look at some different examples which maybe don't fit into the project, or there's some examples which we'll type inside the project and remove, but just because they don't fit into the project structure. But generally, 95% of the code we write will stay in the project.
So Chris is going to show us one of the projects from this course, which will be very interesting. I haven't seen this yet, so let's put it up.
So we'll just take a look at a project and just some of maybe the composition code that's behind the scenes. It's a card editing app, so we can first of all select any of the categories. If we click on all categories, we can see a list of all the cards we can edit. So, for example, if we want to go into this one, this will load this up, and we have an edit screen. We can go into the front, the inside left, the inside right, the back of the card. We can click on anything and this will update this. We can hover over, change the alignment, the colors, the font sizes. We can set it to be bold, italic. We can also replace the background image, change the alignment. And these are all independent, so we can add different things to each page. If we amend the text on one, it won't affect the other components. And this is all using composition code behind the scenes. So in the earlier projects, we don't use composition. We just learn some of the Vue code, which is carried over the sort of regular things. But just to sort of take a look, this is a single file component. This is the template, which is the HTML we want to render to the screen. And then we have the script section, which is all the JavaScript. And this setup section is composition. This is just where we group together the composition code and we import in the section we need. So this is use category. If we go into the composables, use category is just one big function. We're importing the cards we need from a different composable file. Vue-free is very modular, so we import all the parts individually. So we can do tree shaking. We're importing reactivity here. We're importing a watcher. We're importing the view router. And this is all just wrapped in one big function called use category. So this is all the category related things. We have functions, we have our constants. And then once we're finished with all the data we need to get, we just return the data. And this is then available in any of the components. So, for example, if we go to the category, we'll import this file, and then we just pull out any of the code we need. So this is cards by category, and this is the card. Go back to the home page. If we click on Celebrate, this takes us to the Celebrate category. And this is all we're doing here. We're just pulling out the cards that we need for this category, then returning these back, and then they're available to use up in the template. So here we are looping through all the cards. We have a router, which is going to push us to the edit section. The default's the front page, and then we can use the router to switch between the inside left, the inside right, the back. We have the image element, which is dynamic. And this is kind of, if we take a look at the composition at the top level, which is use cards, you can sort of see how simple it is, really. We just import the data file, and this is a named export, so we have the cards. And all we're doing here is saving them to a constant, and this is the reactive wrapper we looked at before. This is a ref, so we import this from the Vue package. We then create constants, and then use this as a wrapper, so if anything changes in the data, everything will get updated, and it will all filter to all the components which needs it. And because we return this data, we can go into any other composable and import this, and then use this inside the function. So it's kind of just a case of breaking things down as little or as much as you want to, just into reusable files, and then we can import them. And just generally be more organized with our code. I think that's kind of the key factor. Just be more organized, more maintainable. So obviously, until we jump in and start writing code, this all looks crazy. It's it probably looks very unfamiliar. But if you look at it closely, especially the top level one, which is really simple, it's we're just importing our data object, saving it to a constant, then returning it back so it can be used in any other file. So
I have to say that it doesn't look too scary now after having a little look. And the other really nice part about this is you have a card business by the end of it.
yeah, definitely. If you want to take it and run with it, that's fine.
Yeah, it's nice. It's a very and that's very interesting because I'm looking there. I'm trying to think in my head as you were doing that. How would I solve those problems? It seems like a very interesting set of problems you're trying to solve in this project.
Yeah.
And so how far along is it into the course when we start to build something like this?
This is the last project, but it's the biggest one too. So it's probably.
I was like, this feels like, I was like, especially when I had to stop and think, I was like, how would I build this? I was like, I hope this is in like step one.
No, this is probably, I think there's 14 sections, 15 sections, and this is maybe the last 4 sections. So wow. Yeah, it's very steady the way it builds up. The first project's really simple, but yeah, I mean, it's just JavaScript. We have our constants, we have our functions, unmounted. If you've used React before, it's probably self-explanatory. As soon as that uploads, it then runs a function. We watch for any changes to the parameters. So here we have the celebrate category. If we go into these, we watch the card page. So when this changes, this will watch for the change and then run the function to get the selected page. We have more functions to update the card, to remove a section, to add a new section, to update them. And again, this is all just returned back from this function. This is probably quite a big composable file. I mean, it's maybe a little bit bigger than I would like to have done, but it's all related, so it's kind of difficult to break it down even further, because even though we want to be organized and break it into smaller files, there is a sort of line you do need to cross as well with grouping things together.
Nice. If you are curious, and if you've watched this far into the video, I'm sure you are curious about Vue 3 and learning Vue, I'm sure. So if you haven't checked out the site, make sure you bookmark, chrisdixon.dev to see the new course updates as they come out. And I'll put links to this course in the description below and everything else. But yeah, I think this it's very interesting. As I said, I love practical learning. That's the way. And, it's a pretty complex problem you're solving at the end, which is the kind of things above what a lot of people will ever do in their day jobs nearly. So it's really getting you into the details with using Vue. So it's really interesting to see that as well. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, the things such as the images as well, the images get saved to Cloud Memory. So we've got a whole different set of APIs to hit and different problems there. I mean, just saving an image, you also have to look at file reader objects and all of this kind of thing. So if we just pull this up, it's used. Got that? Yeah, this is the image upload component. So it's just kind of, this is the composition code, but placed into a component. So with the composable files we looked at before, this is just all of this code, but extracted into a separate file.
Nice.
I chose not to do it for this component because it's only used in this component. So it's probably extraction for extraction's sake, really. But yeah, this is actually the reactive object we looked at earlier, which is a state object. So we just have our default values, and then we upload a file, and this then sets the value. So yeah, as well as Vue.js, we try to learn some different things, some JavaScript, some image uploaders, all just real stuff really that we're going to going to need in the future.
Nice. It's really cool. I'm looking forward to this. I'm going to try this out very soon and see how I get on with this.
Yeah.
I wonder, can I be converted yet? All right, Chris, it was brilliant having you on. Is there anything else you'd like to say before I, stop rolling?
No, give it a try. If you like it, great. If you don't, try something else. Just pick what works for you. And I think that's just something I can say for any part of web development. Don't follow trends. Don't, obviously follow a trend if salary or your jobs in your area depends on it. But otherwise, just try things. If you like it, great. If you don't, move on to something else.
Absolutely. And just a quick plug, because you forgot to mention it as well. If you are interested in just JavaScript things as well, Chris has an awesome free course called Fun JavaScript Projects. I'll also put a link to that in the description below. So if you're trying to beef up your portfolio or anything else, it's definitely a good place to check out. And until next time, happy coding.